dunk on the to quote unquote dunk on the caucuses, that they were done so badly. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. They're supposed to run America, though. Just they are probably going to end up blaming it on President Trump. Now, the president, on the other hand, President Donald Trump, he actually had 32,000 voters, and he smashed all of the incumbent turnout records in Iowa. And he has literally made this, he's made the caucuses great again, at least for the Republicans. So Gallup, before the Iowa caucus disaster, found that 52% of American adults have a negative image of the Democratic Party. And the same people who brought you the Iowa caucuses also brought you the half-baked impeachment. They will be bringing you the November elections, part of it, because they are a part of the process. And just, it's just another indicator that failure over on the left is kind of a feature, not a bug. And we have to be just much more cognizant of how to explain that to people, how to explain to other people why we don't want any part of that in our lives. None of it. So, now, speaking of fundraising and things going well, the New York Post is reporting that Representative Elise Stefanik, who is an overnight sensation within the GOP for her performance during the impeachment inquiry, has raised a whopping $3.2 million over the last quarter of 2019, beating out Adam Schiff and AOC in their fundraising. Schiff, who is the lead House impeachment manager, which is a very high-profile position and should yield him a lot of fundraising opportunities, has raked in $2.5 million. And Democratic Socialist darling AOC has raised about $1.9 million in the same time period. Now, Stefanik is the Republican from Schuylerville, and she was actually one of the most aggressive questioners of witnesses during the House Intelligence Committee Ukraine deal. She and AOC are actually battling for Schumer's Senate seat in 2022. Well, they will be able to. They're not doing that now, but they will be able to. So I think one of the things that we have to be really excited about out of all of this is that it seems that the Republicans have really joined together and coalesced around President Trump. And so that kind of unity going into the general election is going to bode well for us. And I'm really excited to see how that's going to transfer into the election results in November. Fundraising, election results, get out the vote efforts, you name it. I'm hoping that it's going to be really, really just a good thing for the election. So I think obviously we're going to see a lot of really negative things coming out of Washington, D.C. as the last gasp of the impeachment inquiry. In fact, tomorrow is when they're going to vote. So they're still up there spewing lies about the president. And we just kind of have to put up with it and pray for truth and justice and liberty to reign here in our country. But there's a little bit of good news. One of the chief terrorists over in the Middle East who'd been really threatening the president and saying awful things about him and making it seem as if he could literally do anything to the president, he's actually been taken out. The president took him out. Qasem al-Remi is the latest terrorist targeted by President Trump. He's the leader of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and he has been dusted off the face of this earth, sent into the afterlife. According to the CIA, Qasem al-Remi was killed in a drone strike, which took place in January, but they were waiting in order to confirm the information. And so the Daily Wire and Diamond and Silk and everybody's reporting about this. The Yemen branch of Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has tried to attack the United States and Europe and is thought to still have a desire to do that. And the Times reported that the CIA learned about al-Rami's location in November from an informant in Yemen and then started to track him using drones and other technology. Thomas Jaslin, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, told the Times, quote, he was an al-Qaeda veteran whose career started in the camps in pre-9/11 Afghanistan. After he was busted out of prison, he was part of al-Qaeda and the Arabian Peninsula's relaunch management team, becoming their military commander, end quote. So in October, President Trump actually authorized a raid targeting him and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Syria, which resulted in al-Baghdadi's death. And then the day after al-Baghdadi was killed, U.S. forces conducted another attack that resulted in the death of al-Baghdadi's likely successor, Abu Hassan al-Muhajir, when an airstrike took him out as he was being smuggled across northern Syria on the back of an oil tanker truck. So we took him out. And then another terrorist taken care of by the Trump administration was Osama bin Laden's son, Hamza bin Laden, who had repeatedly threatened to attack the U.S. and was believed to be in line to take over al-Qaeda. So really just knocking them off like dominoes. And it's not that we celebrate the killing of any person, but when someone is at war with America and interested in killing troops, American troops, we have to be absolutely certain, singular of mind, that we want to get rid of these threats. And without a loss to American life, without putting any American soldiers at risk, it's kind of a no-brainer. So isn't it interesting that that's happening in the midst of all of this? But the most coverage you're going to see is, of course, they're going to give the Iowa caucuses a big blip. They're going to talk a little bit about, the different things we're seeing with in the news with not just the caucuses, but everything having to do with the primary. They're giving so much attention to what Mayor Pete. They act like he's just so possibly going to be that he's going to be the nominee. Mayor Pete is not going to be the nominee. But it's interesting. It's interesting. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. So going into the chat room, people are discussing how many of the Republicans are actually going to be turncoats. We know it's going to be Susan Collins. She's going to vote for more witnesses, but they don't have enough to overcome. They don't have a majority. The Democrats are not able to turn enough Republicans over to their side to get the witnesses. And so that's why everyone's been saying, it's over. It is totally over. So, I mean, what do you think? What is your primary concern looking at the caucuses and looking at how the Democrats just have not got their stuff together? Are you concerned about that? And do you think it has any implications on the election, or are you glad to see them imploding and seeing that they don't have themselves together? Where do you see it going? I personally, I like it. I love it. I want more of it. I think all of it really, it fascinates me because 538 blog were the ones that said, I think President Trump, I don't remember what they said. They said so much. But Nate Silver's 538 site, they actually have said that they have the final results of the unreleased Iowa poll, and that Biden was in fourth place behind Sanders, Warren, and Mayor Pete. So CNN and the Des Moines Register, which they normally get together, two news organizations get together to pay for these polls. And so this is no different. CNN and the Des Moines Register paid for the poll, and then when they didn't like the results, they censored it. The Iowa Democratic Party did the same with Monday's results. But Claire Malone of 538 blog said Sanders had 22%, Warren had 18%, Mayor Pete had 16%, and Biden had 13%. You might want me to say that again, because 13% for Biden. 13%. So what usually happens is when they give results of polls and things like that to organizations, they'll give you embargoed information. It's embargoed, which means you have the right to look at it and craft stories around it, but you can't release anything about the source information until they lift the embargo. That gives you a chance to write up your pieces so that your articles can come out at the same time that the results are released, but it gives them time to kind of craft their messaging around what it is that they're going to be, quote unquote, releasing. So they have the results, they know what they are, they share them with some news organizations. So the results of this poll were shared with 538. And so you can't release the results until the caucus ends. And, because breaking it before then would be a huge scoop, but it would also undercut the caucus process. And so, yes, the poll results are kind of useless after the caucus, but you've gotten a chance to write your story. So everybody kind of wins, quote unquote. That's the way the whole thing works. So it looks again like the Democrats are rigging this. And, back in 2016, we saw them rig it for Hillary Clinton, and you saw the disastrous results there. If someone doesn't earn it, if it's rigged for them, then the performance is going to be lackluster. It's not going to be as good as if they had to earn that thing. If Hillary had truly won the nomination, then she wouldn't want to erase the hard work that got her to winning the nomination. She would have campaigned all over America. She wouldn't have skipped the Rust Belt states. She wouldn't have taken those votes for granted, and the results might have been different. So we have to thank them for rigging the election, and here they go doing it again. So they don't want us to know that Biden is bombing out and that even the Democrats don't want him anymore, the same way they didn't want Hillary Clinton. And I have to point out, I was actually on Unpopular Opinion with Benji Irby, and he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said that he was a Bernie voter, and he's young. He's a millennial. He was a Bernie voter, and then he came over to President Trump. And so he was really ticked off by what the Democrats did to Bernie Sanders. He said if the Democrats had allowed Bernie Sanders to win the nomination, Donald Trump would have beaten him. But the Democrats would have had to examine their romance with socialism. And had they examined it and really found that it was wanting, that it was an ideology that could not be supported, then they would have gone over to the next portion, which would have been revamping their strategy and probably tacking back to the middle a little bit, which would have made them much more viable for this election. Because if they ran someone who was more common sense from a leftist perspective, more of their voters would be able to turn out to support that person. As it is, they're still toying around with and beating up on Bernie Sanders when all they have to do is say, you can't be a part of our party because you're not a Democrat. It's that simple. They can't keep denying him the nomination, but allowing him to participate in the process. Yet that's what they're doing. So it's one of the things that is most interesting about what we're watching is that the Democrats don't want to just take your medicine. Just take your 2 tablespoons of camphor oil or whatever that stuff is they used to give to kids way back in the day it stunk and it looked like it could move on its own. It looked like it was alive. They'd make you take like a big tablespoon of that or 2, and then you'd lay down under some blankets and you'd get up and you'd be like good as new. They need to take that stuff. Not because I want them to win, but because I think they should be a viable political party by being much more like regular Americans. Right now, they're left of the mainstream. They're left of the mainstream. So Biden he's not looking good. And I don't mean just in his performance. I mean, he really looked bad yesterday. When he was being led out of that caucus, he looked terrible. And I'm saying that out of concern, not to disparage him. He looked like he needs to be in bed with some soup and, some books and maybe some, old Westerns on TV and just, how you take to your bed when you're not feeling well, or you've overtaxed yourself and you take to your bed and sometimes you have to stay in there for 2 or 3 days and you just, the only thing you do is get up to use the restroom and take a shower and you just get back in the bed. And you keep doing that until the day you wake up and you're wide awake and you're alert and you feel good. You feel like yourself. Then you get out of the bed. You get cleaned up and everything and go out into the world again and tackle, whatever. Sometimes you have to do it. You don't feel well because you're run down. So Big Ron asked, does Biden ever look good? He's elderly. So he's not going to look vibrant like a 30-year-old, but he's not so old that he can't look like he's himself. President Trump is in his 70s and he looks like himself whenever we see him. That's what I'm talking about when I say he doesn't look good. He doesn't look like himself. He doesn't look healthy. He looked incoherent. So last story here. This is reporting about this Democratic digital nonprofit group called Acronym. They are responsible for building up the Iowa Caucus app that contributed to delays in reporting last night. I can't believe they trusted this to a group that didn't do the due diligence to make sure it was ready in time. I'm still surprised by that. Multiple Democratic sources, including one of the presidential campaigns, confirmed that Acronym is the app's creator. State campaign finance records indicate that Iowa Democratic Party paid Shadow, a tech company that joined with Acronym last year. Iowa's Democratic Party paid them more than $60,000 for website development over 2 installments in November and December of last year. Now, a Democratic source with knowledge of the process said those payments were for the app that caucus site leaders were supposed to use to upload the results at their various locales. Shadow is the name of one of the groups. Acronym, the name of the other groups. Isn't that just interesting that these are the companies that they chose to run their app? They didn't go with a mainstream digital company from, corporate America. They didn't, you know what I mean? Like, if you have enough money, you can get an organization that makes apps that doesn't usually do political stuff to do something for you. If you trust them on other apps they've rolled out, but they've never done political stuff, you can go to them. And if you go early enough and, really sit down and have some meetings about what your vision and strategy are, you can get almost any industry professional to step outside of their industry for a one-off. And it's not even that difficult to get them to do it. So I think it's fascinating that didn't happen here, that they chose these fringe organizations to make their app for their caucus. Like, it's just, it's crazy. I mean, not that I want to put on a tinfoil hat, but does it occur to you that maybe the reason why they chose these shadowy, untested groups to build the app for the caucuses is because they actually wanted to have a crazy process last night to detract away from Biden's poor performance? Could it be that they had internal polling that showed that in Iowa, Biden was not going to win? And so in order to mask that result, they hired these 2 groups that, who cares if the app is really going to be running or working well, and they set it up this way so that we'd be talking about the groups and the app not working well and not be talking about Joe Biden losing Iowa? That could be something. Anything's possible, am I right? Oh, my goodness. Well, we see what happens as the world turns in politics with the Democrats and the Republicans. God bless you. Have a fantastic evening. Back with you tomorrow.